Good evening, everyone, in Shochu'sday land. This is Stephen Lyman filling in for Christopher. I mean, obviously, I'm usually on the show, but not usually leading the show. He's typically the host, but he's got today off. And so I'm really, really pleased to introduce everyone to Monique Huston, who's the Vice President of Spirits for Winebow, which is a premium spirits distributor in America. But before we get started, I do want to apologize for the confusion over daylight savings time. I completely blame antiquated United States time. So anyway, we are here now, and hopefully people can tune in and enjoy the show. And I realize this actually puts you on your normal time, your 9 p.m. Eastern start, where normally we shift to 8 p.m. Eastern. So this is actually the same for everybody except for us here in Japan, where we're starting an hour later. But since it's not Japan's fault that we have daylight savings time, we typically punish you guys by changing the time twice a year. Anyway, thank you, Monique, so much for joining us, and glad you could make it.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I'm in the car for a minute here, but I'm in transition tonight.
No problem.
Yeah, and my apologies too for daylight savings time, which just seems crazy. Do they don't have any form? I know they have forms of that in other places in the world, but not in Japan apparently.
Not in Japan. No, it's same time all year long, which is kind of nice. I've gotten used to it.
Yeah, sounds nice. Well, thank you for having me. I was a little anxious to even ask to come on because I'm definitely not anywhere near as expert as your usual company that you get to keep.
No, not at all. But you're an expert in your own way in many ways. I mean, you know much more about spirits generally than I think Christopher and I could claim to. You've been I guess, it'd be great to kind of get your story a little bit. You started out bartending, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out I started out waiting tables. I feel like way back when it was like, the job that you can get at a pretty young age and kind of control your income, which I thought was really powerful. Like if you're smiling more and you're doing a good job, waiting on your tables. Man, I felt like if I averaged like $10 an hour, I was like 15, I thought I was rich. It was pretty awesome. But I really like people and I'm really chatty and, all that. So I kind of always waited tables and bartended. And when I graduated school, I moved back home, which was Omaha, Nebraska. And yeah, started bartending again when I was working on another degree and ended up managing, running what we built into the largest Scotch bar in the world at one point. So Scotch is my my guy. I know I'm really hard to see because I'm on the highway. But I absolutely love, single malt Scotch has kind of been my thing for 20 some years. But with that, truly studying other spirits of complexity and grace and terroir, which I 100% believe exists in spirits. Had really kind of then rounded that out with, not just studying Scotch in depth, but other types of whiskey and then really agave. And then I'll tell you, Stephen, and I've told you and Christopher this many times, especially because of the pandemic, us like as a company entering into the Japanese spirits business, we didn't just want to jump into like Japanese whiskey. That's kind of like, seems like everybody's got a Japanese whiskey now, whether or not they're going to follow, it's going to fit into the structure of things in a couple of years. But we wanted to jump in a really big way. And I'm all about the education and the geeky details. And so when we all kind of entered into this partnership, at the very beginning of the year, learning from you two and learning about shochu, which I knew nothing about. I mean, which is kind of sinful, that it's like consumed in such volume in Japan. I knew nothing. I didn't even know how, this. I didn't even know how to pronounce it. I mean, it's horrible. But it's been so fun and so engaging and so enriching, especially in the midst of a pandemic, to kind of embark on a completely new thing for me with shochu. It has just been an absolute blast this year.
That's great to hear. I mean, it really is always fun to discover something new when you're passionate about something, as you and I are passionate about spirits. To discover a new style or a new category that we're unfamiliar with is a lot of fun. And my most recent example of that was just starting to explore Irish whiskey, which I knew Jameson and I knew Powers and that sort of thing. But now that all those new distilleries are opening, suddenly there's a whole world to explore in Irish whiskey, and that's been fun for me as somebody of Irish heritage.
That's a
So
great way of looking at it. I mean, 10 years ago, you would have had three whole distilleries to explore, and now over 20. It's changing. I mean, it's so dynamic.
Yeah, it is, and the other category, I guess, that Christopher actually, he's not on the show, obviously, but that I helped him start to explore is rum. It's not something he'd ever really spent a lot of time thinking about or drinking, and then showing him just how interesting rum can be from different parts of the world and how differently it expresses based on the different traditions is also fun. And then shochu just takes that to another level because it's not just a grain spirit aged in oak or a sugar base spirit, right? It's made from all sorts of things. And then you've got the element of koji and you've got the single pot distillation, and it just becomes this sort of rabbit hole of it's one category and yet it's many, many different things. So
The single pot distillation is like one of the most fascinating parts to me, because it's like when I am educating about something that's more neutral, and you talk about the number of times it's distilled or filtered, whatever it is, you can't hide things in a single pot distillation.
mhm.
It's like the raw ingredient has to be great, and then it just has to be treated, just, I don't know, with so much attention and attention to detail. And it's been fascinating, and I've been really excited, like if I get to taste with you like last time you were in Chicago, to kind of continue to grow my palate to those nuances and go, wow, I can taste the difference between, I'd never had a sweet potato distillate, or
Mhm.
it's really fascinating, and they're distinct and they're massive differences. It's exciting.
There are. That's absolutely right. And I guess you had hinted at it, but just to let people know, Winebow is the national distributor for Honkaku Spirits, and that's how we got connected with Monique, and she's been an invaluable resource for us in introducing the Honkaku Spirits portfolio uh, nationally. But then the way, as she mentioned, the way that she embraces education and the way Winebow embraces education, I think has been really refreshing. Can you talk a little bit about what Winebow's been doing to educate the sales team? And maybe talk a little bit about Winebow, because people may not be familiar with distributors in the U.S.
Yeah. So it's like Winebow is like, a rainbow of wine. I mean, if you're trying to think of it as a word. And we distribute a lot of fine wine and many, many fine spirits. But yeah, we are very education led. And so I think especially as our executive team, befriended you guys, and it turned out this partnership was the right thing for both of us, because it wasn't like you were going to find another company with a lot more experience selling something as unfamiliar as shochu to the masses. Uh-oh, you fell.
We did.
Now you're back. Okay,
Okay.
sorry. I
No
turned.
problem.
I took one distinct turn, but did not crash. So I mean, it had to have been interesting for you guys. So just for people who maybe don't know distribution models, you can't just buy direct. Obviously, you can't just buy shochu here in the States from Steven. It has to go through the US's three-tier system, which essentially began after we came out of Prohibition as a way to ensure that people could not have I don't know, couldn't like price fix, and that you made sure that there were measures, checks and balances to ensure that underage people didn't get alcohol and, things like that. So you have an importer that brings spirits and wine into the United States. They then sell it to the state. And so there's some federal taxes paid. Then the state basically sells into the county, and there's some state taxes paid, and then it gets to your bar, restaurant, retailer. So there's this federal system, state system, local system, your three-tier system. Um, there are people that think it should be abolished. I'm not sure. It seems to be working. And I work in the middle tier, so I'm happy to exist. Um, but Winebow as a company, we really specialize in like higher end, and a little bit more esoteric, I would say, spirits and wines. And with that comes a lot of education, because you're having to speak to people about having a better experience, a more premium experience. Like, why would I want that? Like, people that are drinking our wine and spirits and your spirits are not simply drinking to get drunk. They're thinking in terms of food pairings and why is this distillery that's just down the road from this distillery distinct, and we get into nuances of the shape and the size of the still, the sugar source that we are distilling from, just like all these things. And it's super fun to be a company that cares about that. But we really had to write this education from the ground up. And I mean, I had read your book by then. I had read your book and Christopher's book before I met you guys. But I was just digesting it. It was during the pandemic. I didn't have a sounding board. I didn't have the spirits in hand. I did not have Honkaku level shochu, not just your shochus. I didn't feel like I had access here in Chicago, big city, to the array of things that I wanted to taste. And it's one thing to read about it, but I wanted to taste it. I also want to taste the food that it's meant to go with and have conversation. I don't want to try to enjoy it in a vacuum. And we were so fortunate and are so fortunate that we literally have like these two wonderful experts on the subject. So we embarked, we decided as a team internally as Winebow that we wanted to do a campaign nationally with all of our salespeople in all the states that we operate, that we call Spirits of Japan, and educate on all the spirits of Japan from the ground up. And so we designed modules around, training for shochu, awamori, whatever Japanese whiskey is going to become, the fundamentals, kind of like a 101 for lack of a better term. We used a lot from both of your books. And I think it accurately gave credit where credit was due, but we took a lot of content from the books. And then, had to remember you to write these things from a very intimate, point of view. You live there, you're eating it, you're drinking it every day. And I'm coming at it from somebody who's fresh to it a year ago. So we had to, not like dumb it down, but take it back to a pretty 30,000 foot level. And even then, we finished the modules, and then I was, I got to take you through them one-on-one, which was pretty fun. And it was like, I'm sure painful for you. You're like, whoa, this is, this is what you read, and this is what you heard, and this is how you digested it. And then this is how you're putting it out to the world. So, we iterated that education, got it to a point where we were all comfortable as a group that it was kind of a 101 level for the Winebow team. And then our team of 750, sales consultants and managers and everybody across the country, everybody was required to take it during the month of August. And then we've gotten to then see, as the first container of shochu landed, after the initial 2020 release of the Takamine 8-year-old Koji whiskey landed, we got to then see the fruits of our labor. Did this education that we required, did it work? Did people sell? Yeah, and lo and behold, as it turns out, they definitely did.
Absolutely. No, it's been an incredible response to the portfolio, and that's in no small part due to the efforts of the Winebow team, both with your educational activities and then with the salespeople embracing it and getting out and into the market and introducing the spirits, which has been really, really exciting for us.
It's exciting and it's shocking. We discussed very early on, we have these standing weekly calls where we're all comfortable enough now with each other that we discussed our fear of how, I don't want to call it easy, but it's a whiskey fan's a whiskey fan, and Japanese whiskey is a hot category. The Takamine story is second to none. And the fact that it's true, but it's so engaging. It's got so many American pieces to it, from the cherry trees to, the Peoria, Illinois kind of origin story. There's some pieces in there that are very simple. And I know that all of us really expressed concerns that that we were going to have trouble selling shochu, to the point that we were discussing, I mean, should we require people, to buy the shochu if they buy whiskey? Like, we won't sell them more than X number of cases of whiskey if they don't buy shochu. We were like, we're going to stress about it. And in fact, the opposite happened, which is just insane. I mean, which is just absolutely crazy. I'm going to go in the house.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's been unbelievable. I think it's been unbelievable to the group of us.
I think to all of us, the reception, as I mentioned, has been really beyond our expectations, and having Winebow as a distribution partner has certainly been fantastic.
Sound. Ooh. Can you hear me?
So I can. Yes. The
okay. Good.
there was a question just before we move on from Ian on Facebook, and he was curious about the distribution. He's asking, does the county sell it, or the state level distributor, or the local retailer? What's that? I know it differs by state, but maybe a little bit of a rundown in how U.S. distribution works. And I know that could be an entire episode on its own, but
yeah, it's a really good question, and I probably just simply, especially since I was driving, but now I'm going to sit. Now
please
I'm home.
do take a look.
Yeah, there we go. So it's not technically the county, but there are different alcohol taxes county by county. So it has to be sold in at a federal level, at an import level. It has to be sold at a state level. And that's why you always hear the kind of drama of alcohol is not supposed to be able to cross state lines, et cetera, et cetera. And so different people will ship spirits, and there's very different laws for wine and all of that. But at the county level, whatever county the alcohol is sold in, there's different levels of county taxes. So for example, I'm in Chicago. Cook County taxes are very high. It's 10.25%. So if you could go just outside the county line, you would pay less for the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it does matter, yeah, for the level of taxes that you're paying, but the county doesn't actually sell it. So I'm sorry if I stated that in kind of a confusing way.
Sure. Yeah, he's clarifying that he's actually a tea exporter in Japan, and so he's just looking to see how different industries work. Oh. Obviously, alcohol, because of prohibition, there's a long history of trying to regulate very highly. Also, to my knowledge, tea is actually healthy, and alcohol, while enjoyable, is not necessarily always a healthy endeavor, as we like to remind people to drink responsibly, to sip honkaku. But it's so I think the regulations are quite a bit more strict with alcohol in the U.S. and in other countries, but the U.S. in particular, due to both the issue of federalism, right, where we've got all of these states that have their own autonomy and quite strong compared to, for example, prefectures in Japan or other regions in other countries where the national governments tend to be strong. In the U.S., there are state protections, and so states have a lot of leeway in how alcohol is sold and distributed in their states. Sorry, that was a little professorial, but I did study political science and history in college, so I'll use that as my excuse.
You're spot on. I mean, and to add even more complexity to it, you've got states where even the bars and restaurants have to buy from a liquor retailer. We've got weird size laws, where in Chicago, you can't sell a small 50 ml of anything. That's not legal. So there's, it really, really depends on even a hyper local level. And I always say when people look to import into the United States, it's not one country. You have to look at it as 50 separate states. The laws are so dramatically different everywhere. There's also another great reason to have a great distribution partner, because then it's not your job to know and learn the nuances state by state and make sure that you're compliant. It's our job. So,
Yep. I think that was what was very exciting for the Honkaku team, was realizing that Winebow I believe you're in 15 states plus DC for spirits. Is that correct? Was just
14 technically, but
okay. So 14 states plus DC, but so that was very broad reach for a portfolio just getting off the ground. Where I know, for example, Mizu Shochu, our good friends Jesse Fallowitz, he started out distributing independently, and he was really only in New York State for a long time, and then he's slowly grown out across the country. But it took him probably a decade to get to the point where we were coming out of the gate. So it's really fortunate that I think Winebow is looking for Japanese spirits and is excited about new categories, and we were coming in at the right time. So that feels fortuitous.
There's just not many new categories. I mean, there's not that much that is new. And one of the things I think that appealed to me specifically is like coming from a single malt Scotch background, then really falling in love with mezcal and agave-based spirits. The thing that Shochu the exploration and the excitement around Shochu, the thing that it reminds me of the most closely was falling in love with agave spirits 20 years ago. Because again, you very often have very limited distillation, very kind of like old school techniques, small stills. It's all about the the quality of like the plant, whatever the sugar source is, the technique, and the standards of the distiller. You know, it's very generational, and you know, families and all of these things. But it's like it's about tasting the plant in the glass. You know, not necessarily about tasting, you know, the maturation or whatever it is. And I feel like people that are trying shochu for the first time, what I've witnessed in the past year, it's people who got crazy excited about mezcal 10 years ago, and still, you know, Raicilla and Bacanora and other really kind of specific esoteric Mexican spirits. But where we've had difficulty, and this was maybe not surprising to you, but was surprising to me, it's not easy to sell shochu into Japanese restaurants. And that was shocking to me. I just thought, oh, it's like they're going to carry the Japanese whiskey, they're going to carry the sake. But they have been the ones this year that have said, American people or Japanese people in America don't drink shochu. I've tried it before. I had this bottle, or like, you know, no, this is like very Japanese. This is not going to be an American thing. And I mean, what our top on-premise customer right now, Death and Company, it's got shochu in a cocktail. So it's these American, you know, mixologists, bartenders, whatever. But like, we take it into a Japanese restaurant and they're like, been there, done that. Like, it's not going to be a thing.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. They have been burned before. I mean, shochu has been in the United States for 40 years, but it just wasn't moving for a lot of these small, you know, family-run Japanese restaurants. And so they'll stick to sake and beer. And now that whiskey is popular, they're happy to sell that. But you're right, it's not an easy sell. And as you mentioned, there's now a shochu cocktail at Death and Company, which is one of the top cocktail bars in the world, right? Which is pretty phenomenal. So kudos to Winebow for that effort. Now,
kudos to you guys
as
for
you mentioned,
great shochu.
Well, we do what we can. Fortunately, these are our friends, and they all make good hooch. But you mentioned the container, the first shochu container, actually did gangbusters. I think it sold much more quickly than we expected, and I guess that sort of brings us to a segment that we like to call Booze News. And this isn't really probably news to anybody, but you know, the supply chain challenges, right? Because that first shochu container is essentially gone, empty, like no longer. You probably have a little bit left in your warehouse, but most of it's been sold into accounts. And we're working really, really hard to try to find another container out of Japan to get more shochu to the States. And can you talk? I know you were on a panel at Bar Convent Brooklyn talking about the supply chain and the challenges post-COVID. If you could just talk a little bit about that, maybe for the listeners, so they understand what's going on as far as spirits and alcohol generally with supply chain. Yeah,
it's unbelievable, Stephen. That first container. I mean, again, I we're still just blown away by the response to the shochu that came over. And we didn't necessarily think that we would need or have the bandwidth for a second container of shochu this year. And we've been blown away. Week on week, we're out of stock on another expression. And still people that, you know, maybe got to taste it a couple weeks ago or whatever, they're calling in with orders of things that we just now no longer have. So that is really, really challenging. And we know that it's going to straighten out at some point in time, but we're seeing it across the board. We're seeing it with every spirit coming in from every country. I'm sure that's vice versa everywhere in the world. But in most cases, probably the single most frustrating thing is it's not a shortage of the distillate. It's not as though, you know, there's an agave shortage and we can't make tequila, or there's a, you know, potato shortage and we can't make vodka. The liquid exists. It is every other thing is in short supply. So it could be a specific glass bottle that you use. It could be the paper for the label. It could be the cork, the capsule, the closure, the cardboard box that it is in. And then one of the most recent pieces is the pallets that those cases go on. We've got partners that if you don't show up at their door with a truck and empty pallets, they will not give you your pallets of products. They want pallets for pallets. And it's like, who's even building the pallets? I'm assuming that they probably need to cut down more trees, and there's probably a shortage of loggers. I don't know. It's every single element. And so we've got some partners that are able to say, you know, I'm selling $10 a liter vodka. Do my customers really care if it's in a plastic bottle or a glass bottle? Do my customers really care if the paper is embossed versus just like printed on a dot matrix? there's some places where you can make those changes.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, with most of what is in our portfolio, people are very concerned with quality of the paper, of the cork, of the closure. They don't want to go to a plastic screw cap, plastic bottle with a screw cap, simply to get you the liquid. And it's been incredibly challenging. We just, like, as an example, we have a container of cachaça coming from Brazil. When it left Brazil, we negotiated a rate for the container that was 40% higher than a year ago. So it had gone from $3,400 to $4,700. In transit, they basically took this kind of south side of Chicago attitude, and they said, when it lands, it actually costs you $14,000.
Wow.
So do you want it or not? So it's then going to triple by the time it lands here. And then you're kind of like, well, now I got to do it. We're going to be out of stock. We have customers, in stores can have some other things on the shelf. I guess bars can switch things out for other spirits, but they don't want to. People have loyalty. The quality of their cocktails and their bar program, the quality of the selection on a retail shelf is a real point of pride. They don't want, to have to do that. So it's not like these things are interchangeable one for one. And it's just been unbelievable. The panel that I was on was really brilliant, and really, really sharp people. And we all had to give our prediction at the end for when we think this is going to let up. And the general consensus is spring of 2023. Americans don't seem to be consuming, not just alcohol. We don't seem to be consuming any less of anything. So,
right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And that's that's another year plus. That's another 14 months or 16 months, 18 months from now. And I think, at some point you're going to feel the pinch. I became aware of it when I was back in the States doing the events that we did both at Bar Convent and then with the embassy work that I did. When I went into a big box liquor store in New Jersey and I went to the Japan section, and there was virtually nothing on the shelf. And it's not because people had come in and bought it all like that week. It was because they couldn't restock anything. There were just no containers coming in from Japan. So it was pretty shocking to see. And then to see how quickly the shochu sold through, and now we've got suppliers, like some of our suppliers have already bottled this. The bottles are sitting in their warehouses ready to ship to the port as soon as we tell them we have a container, and we just can't find a container. So that's it's a challenge all around.
It's interesting too, because it's also limited. It's a little bit different country by country, but there aren't even the number of truck drivers needed to actually take the containers over the road from point A to point B. And then truck driving schools have been closed because of COVID. So people can't even train the new drivers. It's just like, as you go through, or even just once you get a container landed, if you go to one of the big import hubs, there aren't even enough people forklift certified to go and unload all the things off the container. So it's just at every step, and at every step too, everything that I just named, there's people involved. And there's a huge labor shortage. So it's just like a completely insane, perfect storm, where it's like, appreciate what you have, buy 2 bottles of something that you want, because you don't know when you're going to be able to get the next one.
True.
But yeah, just definitely just like makes me very mindful of being appreciative of the things that I have, because it's stressful.
Sure. Now I've started buying things by the case because I don't know when I'll find it again. So, that's, we don't want to get into that hoarding situation like when the US ran out of toilet paper early in the pandemic, but it's, if there's something you like, you better make sure that you've got a hold of it. And speaking of labor shortages, actually the same thing is happening here in Japan. We've got a shrinking population and aging population. So a lot of the distilleries are having a hard time filling roles. And Christopher actually is coming to Kyushu soon, and he had contacted one of our favorite barley shochu makers, talked to the president, said, I'd love to come visit you. And he said, that'd be a great day for you to visit normally, but I'm actually taking my forklift certification. The president of the company is learning how to drive a forklift because he can't actually find anybody to do it for him. So it's happening here too.
That is unbelievable. Not shocking, but unbelievable. And that being said, I think a lot of us were like, I will wear any hat to make this better. I will do anything you need me to do. Yeah, for certification, I would go do that. I would not have an issue with that. And my husband's restaurants, and we went down and tasted at one of the restaurants when you were here. And it was
Mhm.
like the gentleman tasting with us was also running the floor, the backup bartender. It is, I mean, truly a testament to their passion for the job and their passion for the
Mhm.
on-premise industry, that they'll still take some time and learn and taste with you, and not just kind of operate at the lowest common denominator kind of factor. But everybody's wearing so many hats, and at home
Mhm.
consumption is way
Yep.
up too. It's like, if Netflix didn't make such good shows, then I wouldn't need to sit at home drinking Shochu'sday. It's just great.
Yeah. No, but you're right. That's the thing, is if you can find something that you love to do, you'll never work a day in your life, right? I sound like my grandfather right now, but it's true, and for Christopher and I, with, when we talk to these makers, and, we're like, we'd like to place an order, and they say, well, that's during the brewing season. We can't really, take the time off of the brewery floor to go and, or the distillery floor to go bottle and box and everything. We're like, well, come down. We'll fill bottles and apply labels and put them in boxes. We'll do whatever we need to do because we really want these drinks to make it over to the American market and for people to enjoy them. So, but I think that's the right attitude with you as well. You're happy to go drive a forklift if you need to, right? Although you probably need a license for that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't think I should be allowed to drive a forklift, frankly. I've seen some forklift accidents. I'll be picturing something. But no, I think that's kind of the general sentiment is, I know the other kind of thing it feels like in the industry news piece is like what are they calling it? The Great Resignation, that we're losing a lot of people from the industry. But I also feel like there's a lot of choice out there. There's a lot of demand for people in every line of work. And this is a line of work, whether it's in retail or really specifically in bars and restaurants. People also, I think it's very easy to leave because you can always come back. And when I started waiting tables when I was 14, it was like, oh, I can step out of this at any point in time, but keep my reputation in the industry good so that I can jump back in at any point in time. I mean, that's always going to be there. And so I don't think that this kind of dearth of employees in the industry is going to be sustained. I think people just need to work through some things and feel safe and really feel like they've come out of the pandemic, and then they'll be back. That's definitely my hope. So we'll see.
Yeah. And, Japan has a solution for this. They do have robotic waiters that have started to roll out in some fast food restaurants. So
I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to tip them. That's the good part. But I'm kidding. Obviously, it's a strange.
Still would.
In Japan though, when you try to leave a tip, I learned this early on. If you try to leave a tip at a restaurant, they'll chase after you down the street to give you your money back because they think you forgot your change, because tipping doesn't exist.
Oh wow!
I mean,
it really doesn't exist at all.
No, the one occupation where I found that they will accept and understand tips is taxi drivers, because a lot of people don't want to take the extra change that's been made from the bills. They don't want the coins, so they'll just say, "Don't worry about it," and the taxi driver appreciates it. But that's the only occupation I found where people don't actually push back against a tip. Now there may be others, but that's been my experience.
That's really fascinating. I didn't know that. I mean, clearly I gotta come over. 2022 is the year. I think too, and I was just talking about this, Stephen, the other day, is the thing that you shared with me about potato salad. And now I'm just like, I love potato salad anyway, but potato salad as this litmus test for restaurants, I just think is so fascinating. I feel like maybe the hobby I'm going to take up during the pandemic is like some potato salad perfectionism.
Nice. Yeah. For those of you who may not be aware, my litmus test for an izakaya is the potato salad. That's the dish that I order everywhere I go. When I first go to a new izakaya, I order the potato salad as my appetizer, because if they care about their potato salad, they're going to care about everything on the menu. They're going to make really good food. So, and if it's not good potato salad, you have a drink, and you leave, because that's an izakaya. It's a casual dining experience. You don't have to stay for an entire meal. You can pop in for a drink or two and head to the next place.
I was so shocked when we went to, Michelin starred amazing Giulio Momose's program here in Chicago, Kumiko. And, you look at the menu and there's just all even what is this? And then there's like the last thing listed is potato salad. I was like, that seems very out of place. And, and then I didn't think to ask. I think I kind of like bookmarked it to go, why is there potato salad? But anyway, when it came out and you're like eyes lit up and you dig in and you have a bite of it, and then all of us have a bite of it, we're like, oh, this is like the best potato salad I've ever had. Steven's like, yes, this is a serious izakaya.
Yep.
And so then kind of learned that. And I love the sentiment of it. I think you're exactly right. It's great to have something like that says, do I want to stay and have a full meal and spend X amount of dollars? Or is this the time to finish the drink and cut and run? And I mean, and that potato salad is amazing.
It is. It's legit fantastic. If anybody has a chance to visit Bar Kumiko in Chicago, Michelin star Japanese concept restaurant and bar, fantastic cocktails. And actually, Julia's book just came out, right? That she wrote with Emma Jansen. So congratulations to them. Everybody should have a look for that. What's it called? The Art of the Cocktail. Is that right? Am I getting the name right? I hope.
Art of the Japanese Cocktail?
Maybe. Yeah, you probably missed that word. The Art of the Japanese Cocktail. That may be it. But anyway, yeah. Look for her book.
I ordered it, but I haven't seen my copy yet.
Yeah, same here. It'll take a while to get to Japan, I guess. No, so do you have I guess that's what we do here in Japan for food, at least what I do for an izakaya. Do you have a cocktail that you order in a bar you've never been to see whether or not the bartender knows what they're doing? Like, what's your go-to?
Yes. I'm at a Negroni, and they can take any spin on it ever, but to me, to take something that is 3 parts, equal parts, the limiting factor, I guess, maybe is just like your creativity or your knowledge of the ingredients and how you want them to fit together. I mean, and you could do it with rye whiskey and make it a Boulevardier, or you could throw mezcal in it, but like, I will give them 100% creativity to do that. But I think it's pretty hard to mess up. And I think it's quite easy to do it in kind of a signature fashion where I'm like, oh, whoa, okay, talk to me a little bit about why you chose those exact elements. But yeah, that is absolutely, I mean, it'd be Negroni for me, and then like biscuits and gravy at a diner.
Okay.
Maybe not together.
That doesn't sound like a bad breakfast, does it? That could be brunch. That could be a weekend brunch. Yeah.
Also, though, how's shochu in a Negroni?
I don't know. You tell me. That's a good
probably
question.
Pretty good. I'm gonna have to do that.
Yeah. My go-to recently has been just a daiquiri. Just you know, again, it's rum is my jam. So outside of shochu, obviously, but so just if you can make a good daiquiri, I'm happy. So I'm
totally with you, and you can't hide it. It's like having a really nice like lager beer. You can't hide things in it. There's nothing to hide behind. It's simple, classic ingredients. I will definitely have to do that. That might be like a project for me tomorrow night, is to play with all the different shochu from the Honkaku range in Negronis.
That'll be a lot of Negronis.
I'll invite people over.
Which spirit are you replacing in that? I guess it's the what are you? The gin, yeah. So what's interesting? Yeah, clearly I don't know much about Negronis.
You have to be very mindful because they're lower proof. You'd have to be really mindful of making sure that you're supporting the profile of the base starch. Because if you completely lose it, what's the point? Or maybe you end up doing like a split base. Maybe you find a gin that is really complementary to that shochu style to kind of amp up the alcohol content and then play with it that way. I don't know. I'm just thinking it through.
Sure. I mean, something like Masako or Motoko, which have quite a bit of heft, right? They got a lot of body. The gin might be an interesting complement to that. I don't know. I just thought about it for the first time. So who knows? But great. So we typically finish up the show with, unless there's more you want to talk about, of course, we typically finish up with what we call newly opened. So we introduce a bottle of something that we've opened recently and been enjoying. I know you just got home, you haven't even had a chance to take your shoes off, but if you have any bottles of anything you've opened recently that you'd like to talk about, it doesn't have to be Japanese, doesn't have to be, hell, doesn't even have to be a spirit really, but hopefully it would be. I can start if you want to think about it a little bit. Last night, actually, I cracked open, this is called Takura. This is an unfiltered sweet potato shochu from Kagoshima by the same makers as Hachiman, which is a really full-bodied, old school, traditional sweet potato shochu, and actually realized in tasting this that there's a real signature flavor profile to the traditionally made white koji shochu, sweet potato shochu, that I think I've evolved to, where I've now realizing what I sometimes associate with shinshu or new make shochu is actually some of the quality of that is still present in something that's been in the bottle for a while. It's been aged, and so Takura, hard to find, but fortunately recently discovered a local liquor shop with incredible, very small but incredible shochu selection. They've only got about, well, this will sound big to people overseas, they only got about 40 or 50 brands. But when you have 5,000 brands in Japan, it's very easy to come to a shochu or find a shochu focused liquor store that's got 400, 500, 600 bottles. So this place has only 2 shelves, really small selection, but really fantastic stuff. So I was excited to find Takura from Kagoshima. So how about you? Anything you've opened recently that you're excited to talk about?
Well, you may or may not know that Jake from your team, Jake Tenenbaum from the Honkaku team, was in the Midwest last week supporting us, which was awesome. I don't know if like anybody that, you know, on Japan Distilled has gotten to meet Jake, but Jake is really brilliant and hadn't spent a lot of time in the Midwest, but he's got this great accent, this Jersey accent, and this amazing mustache, and everybody just loved him, and it was just a blast. But he's a huge whiskey geek like you and I. And so we did a big dinner together. And then Saturday, I invited some close friends over to my home. And you've been over here before too. And basically just said, like, pick, you know, there's some things that are off limits, but not that many. And we had gotten into this conversation the night before. And I'm sorry if there's like people out that are into Bowmore, which is a single malt scotch from the island of Isla. Like Bowmore. It is lower on the peat scale, so typically kind of a little bit sweeter, a little bit of that peaty smoky. They've played around with a lot of like very dense, intense finishes over time, so lots of different wine finishes and, you know, full maturation in sherry, all these other things. But we had gotten into a conversation earlier in the week about this classic note that's in Bowmore, old Bowmores, called FWP. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Stephen. So FWP stands for French Whore's Perfume, not horse, whore. So FWP.
Okay.
And we kind of say it like flippantly in the industry. So it's like also to another huge single malt nerd, you know, we'll taste a Bowmore and go, oh, FWP. Like I get FWP all over that. And Jake was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. I definitely have not had this. Like, how do you describe it? And it's kind of this like potpourri, lilac rose, like oily, unctuous, really floral. I don't like it. I don't think it smells or tastes good, but it's interesting. And it's a particular place in time in this distillery's history. So I just kind of like stored that nugget. And when Jake was over the other night and some other friends, I was like, okay, I got to get this out, you know, because let's just see if he likes it. And just kind of handed it to him without giving him the thinking of like, this has got this mega FWP note in it. And he noses it and he's just like, what is this? Like, what am I smelling? And I'm like, okay, taste it. And he's just like, you know, you get him to describe it. And I'm like, that's it. Like, that's FWP. And he liked it. And he was saying,
of course he did.
He thought the bottle was so special. He was like, I would never share this with anybody. He was like, I would keep this forever because it's so distinct and unique. And he's like, I would never share this with anyone. I would never get this bottle out.
Yeah.
But I don't like it. So the only reason I keep it is this kind of like reference sample. But it was really fun. And to me, I mean, isn't that what booze is all about? I mean, it's just generating like this fun conversation, integration, like taking your palate into this new and strange place. Like it was, I've still got some. So next time you're in town.
Yep. All right.
It was really fun. It was really fun.
What's the vintage on that?
Famous.
What's the
that
vintage
one,
on that? You're saying an older one?
I think it was distilled in the late 80s and bottled in the late 90s. There's something that was going on there. They were changing ownership and they were really small and people didn't really want Isla scotches and it wasn't going into a lot of blends where they were leaving the fermentation over the weekend. So they had short fermentations during the week. And then over the weekend, every fermentation got a 48-hour kick. The thinking that they probably went into a level of malolactic fermentation that drove these really kind of like crazy floral unctuous notes, because it doesn't have it now. Now they're running speed. There's no kind of, short versus long fermentation. So, it's really interesting, but I don't know that many people that enjoy it, but
sure.
Yeah, Jake would.
But that sounds like Jake. I mean, Jake, he's got a very interesting palate. We'll definitely have him on the show sometime. He's for his age, if you did a mathematical formula of age versus whiskey knowledge, he's off the charts. Right? What is he? 24 years old. Yeah.
24 years old. I was saying, do you remember a Saturday Night Live skit about baby toupees?
No.
If you guys go look it up, there's a skit. It's like the bald babies are sad and they're crying, and then there's like they put a toupee on the baby, and then the baby's like happy and he can get girls. But then it extends into a product line of baby mustaches and baby goatees. He's so young and he has like this crazy head of hair and this mustache that I just kept getting these images of like the Saturday Night Live baby toupee sketch.
Sure. No, I often
everybody watch it
forget
before Jake comes on.
Yeah. I often forget how old he is. He's an old soul, right? He's mature beyond his years, and it's really impressive. So really happy to have him on the team. Actually the whiskey with an odd note just reminds me of the story that I conveyed to you when I was coming back to Japan, and you had given me some samples to bring home. And because of one of my suitcases got lost, and so I ended up declaring my alcohol in my luggage, but not all of it was in the suitcase that I had with me. It was only some of it was still in the second suitcase. And the customs agents they needed to inspect my bag. I pull out all of the bottles, and I had forgotten about those little samples. And they have handwritten labels, and they take them away for analysis. And I think, they've got some sort of little chemistry lab in the back of the customs area, and they're going to run some chemical analysis to demonstrate that it's safe for human consumption or whatever. I had no idea what they're going to do with it. But it's like a 22-year-old kid who walks away with the samples, and he comes back about 5 or 10 minutes later. Now I am surrounded by customs agents at this point. I've got like a full 7 or 8 people perimeter around me, and the manager of the team is the one standing and talking to me. And I'm explaining, that I'm in, I was in the States doing promotion for Shochu, and we're in Kyushu and this is happening. And he's like, oh, Shochu. Yeah, I like Shochu. So he starts to warm up to me a little bit. But when the guy comes back, the young man comes back, and he's like, one of these is not alcohol. One of these is not whiskey. And I was like, and then like everybody's hand goes to their hip, like their weapon, right? They all kind of take a step back, and it just becomes a very, very tense moment in the Fukuoka airport. And I was like, I promise. And they're like, who gave this to you? I was like, one of the premier whiskey experts in America, who's an international spirits competition judge and a vice president at a large liquor distributor. Like, it's not some crazy person off the street who handed me product that I have no idea what it is. And so I was like, so which one is it? And it was how do you pronounce it? The Kalila?
It's Kalila. So yeah, Kalila. So it's like very
Kalila.
heavily peated. Yeah, and it's gorgeous, and that's why I thought it would be fun for you to taste it. I was definitely not trying to get arrested, but
yep. So this is the bottle. I had to like read it I basically had to translate this handwriting into Japanese for the top guy. And I explained, distilled 1990, bottled 2004. And this is from cask number whatever. And this is the alcohol percentage. And he was like, oh, okay. Thank you very much. And then everybody walks away. I was like, oh, I'm really glad this guy's a Shochu fan, and that I could explain to him my whole entire purpose for being.
Thank goodness I put all the detail on the bottle so that it made it look legit. But it is so funny. Somebody will heated scotch and go, this not meant for human consumption.
Yeah. But the thing is, I mean, for a young man, you know, his experience with whiskey is probably Japanese whiskey highballs, which are fruity and light, and none of that peat exists in most Japanese whiskeys. So he probably did a sniff test, and he's like, oh yeah, that smells a little bit like whiskey. Oh, that smells a little bit like whiskey. And then he got to that one, he's like, that doesn't smell like whiskey. And so
Definitely not.
Yeah,
it was really fun
easily.
The other night when Jake was over, you know, I always talk about our neighbor who's a brandy fanatic who loves Takamine. And so it was, I got to say to her, oh, this is Jake that works for this company. And he was like, oh, this is your neighbor that's obsessed with brandy. And it's, I mean, still, it's now, 10 months later, it's the only whiskey she's ever liked. And she was so excited to just like talk his ear off about the process and koji fermentation. It's great. And actually too, I hadn't had any of the 2021 yet. And they're different. I mean, they're definitely different when you taste them next to each other, like the two different, vintages. They're a little bit different age. And it's really fun to have that as a tool to kind of bounce those two things off of each other now. So that was a very fun experience.
Sure. Yeah, for those of you who are unaware, the 2021 Takamine landed recently, and the 2022, if you can still find it, it's probably worth picking up because there aren't many bottles left in the wild, I'm guessing. And I actually haven't tried the 2021 because it landed after I came back. So next time I come to the States, I'll give it a try. But yeah, this has been great.
We'll do our best. We'll do our best to save you a bottle.
All right. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you so much, Monique. This has been a lot of fun. We'll definitely have to have you back on the show at some point, and really appreciate your time. And I learned a lot every time we talk. I learned something, and today was no exception. I hope our guests did as well. So
yeah, this was really fun. Again, I'm sorry our time change and that I was running a little bit late, but this has been really, really fun.
Yeah. Oh, no problem at all. Yeah, it's glad we could still make it work. So thanks so much. And to all of you out there in Shochu'sday land, Christopher normally does this sign off, so I'm going to do my best. We wish you a hearty and heartfelt kanpai. How do I end the broadcast?
I'm going to go get a drink.